Suzanne Dietz, a local author from Youngstown, New York, has recently published a book named Honor Thy Fathers and Mothers. The book tells the stories of Western New Yorkers who were involved with World War II, not only on the battlefield, but on the home front. So to get a closer look at her inspiration and methods for writing the book, I sat down with her for an interview.
This book happened because of a question. I'd finished another book. It was about the town of Lewiston and the village of Lewiston. And there was a photograph in the book about POWs who worked on a farm off of River Road. And it was a farm that I had lived on the property when I was a young girl and a teenager. So I was very curious about these prisoners of war because they did not look European. They looked Asian. And so I wanted to study to document if it was in fact they were German or they were not, and how did they come to be here when we thought we only had German prisoners of war. I didn't look for the people in the book. Carl Jung, who's one of the fathers of psychotherapy with Sigmund Freud, called it synchronicity, that events happen and he calls them coincidence. But for me, it really was a spiritual journey because of the different people that came into my life that I wasn't looking for that helped the story to evolve. Western New York was a major industrial cog in the production of defense armaments, aircraft. We produced in Western New York 1/6 of the industry that defense needed to fight the war. Aircraft, engines, things that you wouldn't even think of involving seat covers for the aircraft, all those different things. Westinghouse and some of the other industries in Niagara Falls and Buffalo converted from like manufacturing refrigerators to manufacturing a product that was needed in the war effort. It was very important, not only because we were producing a lot of the aircraft at Curtiss-Wright and Bell Aircraft, which are Western New York aircraft manufacturers at that time, but we have Fort Niagara. And Fort Niagara was an induction center where men from this area would come. They would be there for about 3 days, get the shots, get their uniforms, and then sent off for basic training somewhere else. So it was a very important part, especially in the beginning of the war, and as the war evolved, we were faced with the task of what we were going to do with the prisoners of war. Our allies, the British, said, hey, we can't take any more, and we kept capturing more Germans. So the United States was faced with how we were going to deal with that issue. And Fort Niagara also became a major prisoner of war camp.
After discussing the content of the book, I asked Suzanne what she hopes the impact will be.
For people my age whose fathers served in the war or whose mothers were involved in the war, it tells part of their story. Most of our fathers and mothers did not want to talk about what happened to them. So I think it's going to give them insight into the infantry soldier, the ball turret gunner, our mothers who for the first time, some of them became involved in the workforce. Typically, prior to that time, women, once you got married, you didn't work in a factory or you weren't allowed to teach school. So for some who weren't even in those kinds of positions before they were married, all of a sudden it changed. It was a big, dramatic societal change for women. Gave them an opportunity to earn a paycheck, and some of them earned a fair amount of money working at places like Bell Aircraft. So it really changed our society. It was the really beginning of, I think, a big societal change for women in our country. The book's gotten wonderful reaction. It brought up memories for people who lived during that time. So even if they didn't have the experience of serving overseas, maybe they were 10 or 11, it brought up their own memories. Also, one of the things that has come out is that even people who served during the war told me that they found out things that they didn't know about the war by reading it. Actually, writing a book is like taking a very challenging course in school that requires a lot of research, a lot of time, putting things together, deciding how things are going to be put together, the sequence of things, what are you going to include, what are you going to exclude. Editing is a big part of it. Sometimes when I would interview someone, they would mention one fact, like one sentence, and it was something that I wasn't familiar with, so I would want to make sure that I had really good historical background. So I might read one or two books for one sentence that someone told me about to make sure that I documented. So there's a lot of work to it. I'm hoping part of the impact of the book is that people will realize that we have a responsibility as citizens to know what our government's doing, and we don't like it, to be activists and stand up and speak out and write them letters and send them email and protest and do all the things that made our country great. I think a lot of times we have an idealistic notion of the founding fathers of the United States, but if you look back historically and you read about John Adams and the different people and Thomas Jefferson, they argued, and they had very different opinions, but they worked together to form this wonderful country that we lived in, and that a good democracy, the foundation of it is all of our different ideas and opinions and coming together and talking and thinking about these things and then trying to come to good decisions for the good of all the people in the United States.